Hey everybody, it's Ronnie again, and Sasha, as you can see. I'm back with the third installment in my True Chilling Tales, and this video is actually quite an interesting story. It's one of my favorites, um, and it's probably going to be a little bit longer. So bear with me, stick with it. It's worth the wait, I promise. So before I actually go into the experience that I want to share with you, I want to sort of talk about where I was in my life. I think it's kind of important to the story. So um, during the time that I was 18 and turning 19, I was living with friends basically, and that time period in my life was the only time that I've really sort of had like a group mentality where I was always with a group of friends and I lived with a bunch of people and there was always a lot of people around and people coming and going and we were always going to parties and we were always going and doing things with each other. um, I After that time period I'm a little bit more of a loner. I mean, I have more one-on-one friends, but at that time I was surrounded by people constantly. So it's kind of important to know that. And I was in transition at the time that this story took place. I had just turned 18, and I had about a 3-month window where I was going to be moving to Seattle. And so I had a 3-month period of time where I needed a place to stay in Port Angeles. So I was moving from Port Angeles to Seattle. And my friend Kelly, who was my good friend, she also was in the same situation as me. Both we had been living in two different places, but staying at the same place, and so we ended up moving in with a woman named Janine, who was a friend of my best friend Raven, and Janine is now one of my best friends. We're still in touch to this day. Anyway, Kelly and I moved into Janine's place, and we rented a her spare bedroom. And when I moved in with Janine and I started to get to know Janine, it became a really important time in my life. That 3-month period of time was really important. I had my first real spiritual awakening, and I started to kind of come into my own being more. And I think that the real process of loving myself started to happen and unfold for me. And Janine and a lot of the people that I was surrounding myself with at the time played a large role in that. And it was also a really interesting time because I started to really expand my psychic abilities. I've always been a very intuitive person and had experiences even as a child where I would, think of somebody and they would show up, or I would go somewhere knowing that somebody was going to be there when I shouldn't know, and they would be there, or little things. I don't claim to be a psychic person by any means, but I think to some degree or another we are all psychic because I believe that we are all spirits having a human experience. So anyway, I started to really, it was just the energy in that house was amazing. Janine is a very psychic person, and so, for example, my friends John and Hillary would come over, and Hillary was really interested in this. And we were expanding telepathically. I know this sounds kind of weird and kind of new agey, but it was all really normal at the time that we were experiencing this. But Hillary and John used to come over, and Hillary was really interested in this whole process, and she used to hold up like some cards. So she would hold up a card, and she would look at the face of the card, and I would be seeing the back of the card, and she would focus on what the card was and like send me the mental picture, and I would sort of focus and open myself to receive, and I would say 4 of diamonds, and she would turn the card around and it would be the 4 of diamonds. And I was accurate a lot. I mean, it's astounding to me now how many times I actually got that right, and I can't believe that I stopped practicing that or pursuing it. I mean, I just got caught up in life, and if somebody held up a card to me now, I really doubt that I would be able to tell them what what card it was. But at that time, I was really good. Was really good. And another time, the last thing I want to tell you before jumping into the chilling story is one night I was in bed. Kelly and I shared a room. There were twin beds, so we each had a bed. And I used to lay in bed and meditate. I used to do these deep breathing exercises to help me relax and fall asleep. And this particular night, I could not fall asleep. And after I had done the meditations, I laid in bed for what felt like ages and just couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't shut off. And so I was laying there wondering if Kelly was actually awake or not. And so I said out loud, I said, "Kelly?" And as soon as I said her name, she freaked out. She was like, oh my God, what were you going to say? What were you going to say? And I said, I was just going to ask if you were awake because I can't sleep. And she proceeded to tell me that she couldn't sleep either and that she was laying there in her bed and she was thinking about this whole thing about telepathy that we had, everybody had been talking about and we had been experiencing, and she hadn't really quite experienced it. So she was laying in bed and she was thinking about it, and she said, well, I can't sleep, and she didn't know if I was awake or not. So she basically had an inner dialogue with herself saying that if I was awake, she was going to send me a message and that I was going to say her name. She was basically, mentally sending me the energy to ask her if she was awake. So in her mind, she said, Ronnie, you are going to ask me if I'm awake right now. And in her mind, as soon as she said right now, I said out loud, Kelly. And so that's why she freaked out. And that's why she knew what I was going to say, because she basically was... Anyway, you get the point. So now that I've painted that picture for you, let me jump into the chilling tale. So this one particular night, I was at the house alone with Kelly. Janine had left; she was gone, and it was just Kelly and myself. And Kelly was going to a party on foot, so she had left. She left for the evening, and I was going to be all alone for a while, which is fine. And I remember that I was in the bedroom, and I came out of the bedroom into the living room. And as I came into the living room, I want to paint the picture of what the room looked like so you can see. But I'm walking into the room. There's a sofa here, so it's the back of the sofa is to me, and it's facing into the room. Then there's an actual couch on the left-hand wall, and straight ahead is the fireplace. And in the right-hand corner of the room was the television on a television stand. And on the floor at the foot of the television stand was a puppy that was sleeping on the floor, a little husky that Janine had rescued. So I was coming into the living room to sit down on the little sofa that had its back towards me, and the television was off, and on the screen I could see the reflection of myself and of the room. And so as I came into the room, obviously my reflection got bigger, right? Because I'm getting closer to it. And then I came and sat down on the sofa. But as I sat down on the sofa, my reflection continued to go towards the television. And as it came towards the television, it blocked out the reflection that I was seeing. It blocked out the reflection of the room, as if there were another presence that wasn't my reflection that was there with me going towards the television. And as this image in the television screen blocked out the reflection of the room and got closer to it, the sleeping puppy on the floor started to react and whimper and it was laying on its side and it was making like a running motion and kind of whimpering in its sleep. And so I saw this whole thing and experienced it, and I became absolutely horrified. I mean, I became really afraid, and I had this fear just fill my body. And when that happened, all of a sudden my energy, I was drawn all of a sudden to the fireplace, and on the left hand side of the fireplace, and again, this is my left hand, it's a mirror image. On the mantle was a framed black and white photograph of a man, like a portrait of a man. and I didn't know who the man was. There had never been any dialogue between myself and Janine about this particular photograph, so I didn't know who it was. But my attention was drawn to this photograph, and as I looked at the photograph, now this is what's really crazy, and some of you may have a hard time believing this, but I saw this. The photograph became like a three-dimensional picture, and it kind of popped out of the frame, and it was still a still image, but it started to do little things with its mouth and wink, do little things with its nose. So it's like it was actually moving, and I was looking at this, and this all happened very quickly. Keep this in mind. And I saw this photograph come to life before my very eyes, and I was sent a telepathic understanding without words. There was no words involved. It was just an understanding that came over my being that this man was Janine's grandfather, and that I was not to be afraid, that this was Janine's grandfather. There's no reason to be afraid, that he was just here kind of overseeing things. And I kind of calmed down after that, and I was less afraid, but I was still afraid. I mean, it was really an unsettling experience. And what's really interesting about that is while I was having this experience and I was going through this terrifying process, Kelly, who I had had the telepathic experience with in the bedroom before, was walking to this party, and she experienced it with me. And she felt my fear. And she didn't know what had happened, but she was walking and she was fine and she was going to this party, and all of a sudden she was filled with this dread, and she had this sort of breakdown, and she came back to the house and she came running to me and was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? I know something's wrong." And she was crying. She felt what I felt, and it was absolutely astounding. And so I relayed the whole experience to her, and she believed me, and we comforted each other. We were very close at the time, and we spent a lot of time together. So she was like my sister. So after that, the next day or whenever I saw Janine again, I asked her if that was her grandfather in the photograph, and she said it was. And he didn't look like a grandfather in the photograph. It was like taken, probably in his 30s or 40s. So it looked like a man. It didn't look like an old man. And she confirmed that it was her grandfather. And because Janine, my friend Janine, is very psychic herself and has had a lot of experiences herself, she had no reason to question me. So when I told her about my experience, she took it at face value, and she believed me, and basically was like, "Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's my grandfather." So I never felt the need to prove it to her. However, I told all of my friends about it. And like I said, at that time, I was surrounded by a lot of people. There was always a lot of friends coming and going and a lot of people over. And nobody really quite believed me. They, I remember friends specifically telling me that I had an overactive imagination, and I knew what I saw. I knew that this wasn't a hallucination, because it wasn't just about seeing it. I experienced it, and there were all these little factors, all these pieces, that it wasn't just me. I mean, there was the dog, there was the situation with Kelly, the fact that I didn't know it was the grandfather. So I never felt like I had to prove it to Janine, because she accepted my story, but I felt like I had to prove it to my friends and kind of prove to them that I wasn't crazy and that I wasn't making it up. So this one day, there were a bunch of people over, and I said, "Look, you guys, I'm going to sit you down and I'm going to show you this photograph." And what I forgot to mention is that after that first night, every time I looked at the photo would come to life. It would sort of pop out of the frame, and it would move its face, and it was always sort of like mouth, like the crook of the mouth would kind of go up and down, and the nose would crinkle, and the eyes and the eyebrows would move, while still sort of staying a still portrait. So anyway, this particular day, my friend Zach was at the house, John and Hillary were at the house, Tiffy and Kelly were at the house, and I believe that Jen and Amber were there. I don't completely I'm not completely certain that they were, but I'm 90% certain that they were. So I had all these people over, and I said, look, you guys, I'm going to sit you down, and you're going to look at this photo, and you're going to see that I'm not making this up. So we all sat down, and I said, look. And I pointed at the photo, and I said, look. And sure enough, it popped, he kind of popped out of the photo. And when he did, everybody reacted with a gasp. Like everybody was taken aback. Like, like they couldn't believe their eyes. And we're looking at a photograph, and to have a reaction all at the same time. And then when he started to move, people started to react at the same time. And let me tell you, he put on a show. This photo did things for the group of us that he had never done for me. And I remember the climax. I don't remember everything that it did, but I remember it really moving a lot. And the climax was that he made the eyeballs in his eye sockets roll all around. I remember his eyes rolling all around, and everybody being really shocked and sort of expressing that simultaneously together. And I remember my friend John was a little bit more skeptical, and so I remember being really impressed by his reaction, because it was really authentic, and he was really experiencing what he saw. And my friend Zach, who was this big guy, he's like this big guy, I don't know how tall he is, like 6 foot or something. Zach, I don't know how tall you are. But anyway, I will never forget looking over at Zach, and he had both of his hands on his face with this look of disbelief and tears streaming down his face. So it was really real, and I made my point. Like I saw this thing, I knew it was real, and there was no dialogue while we were experiencing it. So it wasn't like I brainwashed them. I've had people tell me, well, you convinced them and all this stuff, and it was like, no, I didn't even know that thing could make its eyes roll all around in its head, and we all saw it, and I didn't talk about it. So they believed me after that. And we kind of, that was 1998, so that's been a long time ago, and we've all remained friends, or I've remained friends with all of those people, but life has taken us all in different directions, and I had actually lost touch with some of them, but fortunately for Facebook, I'm reconnected with everybody, and I recently tagged them all in a message, recounting the experience and asking them if they remembered it. And I heard back from 3 of them. I heard back from Tiffany, I heard back from Kelly, and I heard back from Zach, who all remembered the story. And and they remember it happening. So anyway, that, and another thing, the last thing that I will tell you before closing this video is that I had a couple of photographs in Janine's house with the photograph of the grandfather on the mantelpiece. And for years after that, I could look at the photograph of the room and see the portrait moving inside the photograph. No joke. I know it sounds crazy, and I know I'm risking sounding like a lunatic by telling you all this, but the truth is I experienced it, and so did other people, and I'm not crazy. And I want to share my story with you because I think it's really, really interesting. So on that note, this concludes the 3rd installment of my True Chilling Tales. Stay tuned for the 4th video. I'll be posting it soon. Alright, take care.